Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to unpack a powerful idea that will, I promise, completely change how you see the world. It's called antifragility. It's all about how some things don't just survive shocks, they actually get stronger from them.
All right, so let's jump right in with a question that seems simple, but it's actually really tricky. Think about it. If you're mailing, say, a box of delicate champagne flutes, you'd slap a big fragile sticker on it, right? But what would you write on a package where the contents actually get better the more it gets tossed around? What's the word for that?
Now, most people, and maybe you too, would say robust or strong, and that's a good guess, but it's not quite the full picture. See, a block of steel is robust. It can take a hit, for sure, but it doesn't get better from being hit. The true opposite of fragile is something that loves volatility, something that literally gains from disorder. And there's a word for that: antifragile.
To really let this sink in, we can actually look to ancient mythology. There's this trio of classic stories that just perfectly lays out this whole spectrum, from fragile all the way to antifragile. So, first up, we've got the story of Damocles. Picture this guy. He's at a huge feast, but hanging right over his head is a massive sword, held by just a single horsehair. I mean, that is the definition of fragile. One tiny shock, one little jiggle, that hair snaps, and it's game over. He is completely at the mercy of randomness. Okay, next up is the phoenix. Now this thing is robust. It can go through a total catastrophe, like bursting into flames. But what happens? It's just reborn from the ashes, right back to how it was before. It withstands the harm, but it doesn't gain anything from it. It just hits the reset button.
And then there's the Hydra. This is where it gets really interesting. The Hydra is truly anti-fragile. You attack it, you try to hurt it, you chop off one of its heads, and what happens? It doesn't just survive, it comes back stronger, with 2 new heads growing in its place. It literally feeds on the very attacks meant to destroy it.
Okay, so how does this actually play out in the real world? Well, it all comes down to what you could call the hidden math of harm. This is where we get into why a single massive blow is so much worse than 1,000 tiny little taps. There's this fantastic old saying that captures this perfectly. It's so simple, but so profound. The average depth tells you absolutely nothing about the 10-foot deep hole in the middle that could drown you. Averages hide fatal risks, because harm isn't spread out evenly.
And this idea is not just about rivers. It's about, well, everything. Take your grandmother, for example. An average room temperature of 70 degrees sounds lovely. She'd be perfectly comfortable. But what if you get that 70-degree average from 1 hour at freezing and another hour in scorching heat? Well, that's not lovely at all, is it? It's deadly. Because the harm from those extremes doesn't just add up, it accelerates.
So fragile things, they have what's called a concave response to stress. Just picture a frowning face, right? That's the shape. As the intensity of a shock goes up, the harm it causes gets disproportionately worse. Every extra bit of pressure hurts way more than the one before it.
But anti-fragile things, they have the exact opposite response. It's convex. Think of a smiling face. For these things, up to a certain point, the more volatility and shocks they get, the more they benefit. I mean, think about lifting weights. Lifting a 100-pound weight once does way more for your muscles than lifting a 1-pound weight 100 times. The benefit accelerates.
Okay, this is all fascinating, right? But how do we actually use this? How can we build this into our own lives? Well, there's a really powerful strategy for doing just that, and it's called the barbell. The whole idea behind the barbell is to completely avoid that wishy-washy, uncertain middle ground. Instead, you go to the extremes. You become hyper-conservative in some parts of your life and hyper-aggressive in others. What this does is it basically cuts off your downside risk while leaving your upside completely open a possibility. Finance is the easiest place to see this in action. Imagine you put, say, 90% of your money into something incredibly safe, like cash in a bank account. You basically can't lose much. Then, you take that last 10% and you go wild with it. You put it into really high-risk, speculative ventures. See what happens?
Your maximum loss is capped at just 10%. But your potential gain? It's unlimited.
But this isn't just about money. Not at all. This barbell strategy pops up everywhere. Think about the writer Franz Kafka. He had this super secure, kind of boring day job as an insurance clerk. That was his safety net. And because he had that security, he was free to write this absolutely revolutionary, bizarre, speculative fiction in his free time, without ever having to worry about how he was going to pay the rent.
And the source material for this explainer, it gets even wilder. It points to a kind of biological barbell. The idea is that in some species, a female might pair up with a stable, reliable provider, the accountant type, to make sure the offspring survive. But she might also seek out an alpha type, the rock star, for genetic upside. It's this wild strategy to limit the downside while still exploring that potential upside.
So all of this, it leads us to a really crucial and kind of counterintuitive point, the danger of helping. Sometimes our very instinct to step in and fix things is exactly what makes them more fragile.
Just check this out. There was a study back in the 1930s. They took a big group of kids who doctors had already checked out and said were perfectly healthy, no need for a tonsillectomy. But then they showed those exact same kids to a different set of doctors. And what happened? A whopping 68% of them were suddenly recommended for surgery. It just goes to show this dangerous bias we have to do something, even when doing nothing is the best option.
And there's actually a word for this. It's called iatrogenics. It means, literally, harm caused by the healer. It's when the treatment ends up being worse than the disease. And this is a huge, often invisible risk in medicine, in economic policy, really anywhere people try to intervene without understanding the system.
Okay, so if jumping in and trying to fix things is so often a bad idea, what's the alternative? Well, the path to becoming anti-fragile isn't about adding more complexity or trying to predict the future. It's about subtraction. It's about knowing what to remove.
This leads us to a really cool mental model called the Lindy effect. Basically, it says that for anything that doesn't have a natural expiration date, like an idea or a technology, its future life expectancy is proportional to how long it's already been around. Think about it. A book that's been in print for 100 years is a good bet to be in print for another 100. Why? Because time is the ultimate stress test. It just destroys whatever is fragile.
And this whole idea of subtraction, that's where so much real strength and innovation comes from. Steve Jobs said it perfectly. He said focus doesn't mean saying yes. It means saying no to hundreds of other good ideas. Innovation for him was about saying no to 1,000 things.
So, let's bring it all home. What's the big takeaway here? We are absolutely obsessed with adding the next new thing, the next quick fix, the next intervention. But what if the most powerful, the most anti-fragile thing you could possibly do is just stop? What if it's about identifying what's fragile in your life, your work, your systems, and simply removing it? So the question for you is, what are you going to subtract?